Hello. In this tutorial, we will be finishing out our work on the modified level set piece. We will see how to create a new mod with our level set meshes, use the Guts editor to add the pieces with the data editor and room piece palette, create a test level, and do some play testing. Let's get started. Now we want to start actually setting up our mods. I've opened a folder to where my Torchlight 2 mods are for editing. To start with, I'm going to make a tutorial PV for pink vertex. And then I want to make a tutorial OC for Ogre Cave. Let's start with the pink vertex. Now we want this folder structure in here to match what the original was. So we'll create a media folder. Followed by level sets. Followed by catacomb. Now this doesn't have to exactly match. You could make your own set, so we could say even catacomb additional. That way we would have less of a chance of collisions with other mods. So now I'm going to go in to where I exported the pink vertex version of the meshes. I'm going to grab all of the meshes and I'm going to drag them into my catacomb add folder. There they are. Now we want to go back and do the same thing for the tutorial OC. So we wanted, it was levels media. Level sets. And catacomb add. Go up to the OC folder, grab our mesh files, and we'll drag that into this folder. Now it's time to start Guts. Since I created those folders, they're already listed as mods. Let's go ahead and start with the pink vertex method. To begin adding these pieces, we want to come into the data editors, the tile set and room pieces, and we want to look at the catacomb, because this is where the piece started from that we copied and modified. We want to look at that particular floor piece, and it's used in this for blank. There are multiple meshes listed here, and that just allows you to place different floor pieces. You can just copy and paste, or not really copy and paste, but it's a shift click and it'll put tiles on the floor and kind of randomize them to a certain extent so that you don't end up with patterns or having to manually manipulate it to look randomized. And they all share a single collision mesh. One thing we'll want to note is the snap values for this particular piece. I've already went ahead and written them down so that I have access to them later because we're going to need them when we set up our new piece. To set up our piece, I don't really want to put it into the catacomb section. I don't want to dirty up this pre-existing piece. I'm going to go ahead and make a new one, and I'm going to name it Catacomb Add. Now when I come over to the tile pieces, you can ignore this because it's not really there. It's just left over from the previous thing we were looking at. I want to hit new because I'm creating a new tile piece. Let's call this one Floor Catacomb Floor Obstruction 01. We need to add a mesh file. Go up to our mods folder, into one we're currently working on. Select the mesh that has the texture on it. Now we want to add both of those collision files. Now come over to the snap, and we want to enter in those values I was talking about earlier. So we had 4. $1.375, 2.75, 5.5. And then finally, the rotation, we only want it to rotate at 90 degrees. That's it for that. Hit save. Can close this out. Now, unfortunately, the tiles won't show up yet. You have to close Guts and restart it before that tile will be accessible. I'm going to go ahead and do that off screen, and I'll start the video back again once I've reloaded Guts. Guts is reloaded, and we're ready to start looking at that new floor tile we've made. To begin, we'll come up here to View, and we'll load up the Room Piece palette. We want to change this to be Catacomb to start with, because I want to put out some normal floor tiles for us to just be able to walk around on. Click Tile Set. Here's all the Catacomb tiles. We'll come down to Floor Blank 01. Double clicked. I've now got a nice tile in the middle of my floor. I can shift, click, drag to make copies. Go ahead, fill this out nice and big. So that when we start doing our dev testing, our character has somewhere to stand. you can kind of see that randomization effect I was talking about earlier. That even though it's just one tile, that it's, as it's set up in the room piece, that it randomizes whenever you put it down to one of the different tiles in that set. Now let's go ahead and pick one, and we'll change this one to be the tile that has the obstruction in it. So we'll come back and to switch to our palette view again. And now instead of catacomb, we want to come down and pick our catacomb add. Now originally this was not showing up here because I missed a step. So what I had to do to get that to show up was to come back into my tile sets and room piece editor, come down to catacomb add, tile pieces, properties, and I had to click tile set. Wasn't there. But yeah, the tile set, oh, that's because I hadn't selected it. There we go. Now the tile set had to be selected for this floor piece, otherwise it wouldn't show up in my room piece selector. So back to my palette, I can double click that. Now I've got that tile there. Now, yes, that doesn't look right. The texture is not being applied to this. We'll probably have to copy over the material file and possibly even the DDS file for this particular piece to show up. But since it's here, let's go ahead and play test it and see if the character is obstructed by this little stone column sticking up. There's our player. Oh, I've got a little zombie there. Get him out of the way. And there's our piece. And I can stand on it, but I cannot go through that column. Although it actually kind of seems like I can't step on hardly any of it. I'm not sure that's quite right. But at least I can't go through the column. I'm going to go ahead and close guts so that we can copy over the material file to try to fix our texture problem. So I ended up needing to copy both the material and the DDS file into this folder, and then my texture shows up properly inside of guts. Now we want to do our mod using the Ogre Cave plugin. However, you remember earlier I talked about the material and how it was renamed. Well, I don't want to use the material file that was generated here because it just doesn't match the rest of Torchlight with all the extra options. And sure, I could change those options, but really what I want to do is just to use the material file as it already exists. And we saw with the last mod, or with the last export and mod creation, that I will need the material and DDS in there in order for it to show up properly inside guts. So I'm going to copy the original material file and the DDS. But now we need to fix the material inside of our mesh files. Well, in the one mesh file that has a texture. Because if I click on this, it'll load up, but it can't find that material because it's looking for an underscore instead of a slash. So we need to fix that. To do that, we want to come over, find our mesh, XML. I'm going to open it with code. And we can come in here, shrink that down, find where the slash should be. Put it back in. Really, this bottom submesh's name thing is not needed. I'm just going to erase it. Save it. Now I need to run the XML I just edited through the Ogre command line tools, Ogre XML converter. I'll bring that over, bring it down a bit so we can see. I've got my shortcut set up from the first video. I'll grab this XML and just drag it over top of my shortcut. Window came up on my other screen briefly. It's already run. So now I'll copy this over top of the file we had copied earlier. Oh, it's looking for a PNG. Yeah, the original material file from Torchlight wants PNGs for some reason. But the Torchlight engine uses DDS in most places. It did find the material, so we know that part of it's working. And since we know that this material works fine with this DDS, I'm just going to leave it even though it's not showing up inside of our little Ogre Meshy preview. I'll start guts up and then we can continue. So I'm starting guts again. This time I want to pick the OC or the Ogre Cave. Now that I have guts loaded again, I'm going to come into data editors, file set and room pieces. We're going to follow the same process that we followed when using the pink vertex exporter. So I still have that file that has the the tile pieces, floor blank, snap settings. And we don't want to forget to do our properties this time. So what we're going to do is click the plus, new. We're going to give it the same name as what we did in the other one. We want to create a new tile piece. Give it a good name. We'll add our meshes just like before. Except for this time we go into the OC directory. Make sure we're grabbing the texture mesh for the top. And the collision mesh for the bottom. Go to the snap. I've got the values up on my other screen. So we want 4. Then we want 1.375, 2.75, and 5.5. Snap rotation of 90. And unlike last time, we will set the tile set during this creation so that we don't have to worry about it later. Go ahead and do a save. Now that it's finished saving, I realize this is not what I named the other one. I'm going to rename it to match what I had on the other. Save again. And just like last time, we now need to close guts and restart it so that it picks up these new tile pieces. Okay, now guts is back up and running. Let's go in and create ourselves a little demo level, just like last time, to see our new piece in action. Okay, our palette loaded, and it loaded with everything this time. Took it a little while. So we'll come in, we'll do like before, just do regular old catacomb, pick our floor blank so that we can draw ourselves a nice little platform here to start with. Ooh, wrong one. That ought to be pretty good. And we'll just pick one of these. How about that one? Go back to the palette. Change from catacomb. Catacomb add. There's our new piece. There it is on the map. You can see it's nicely textured, blends right in. Let's try it out. There's the piece. Notice I can get a lot closer to it this way than what I could with the other one. I really think that the way that the Ogre Cave exporter does the submeshes for the collisions is better than doing it as two separate pieces. You know, the only downside is you have to either rename your materials or, well, in this case, I didn't rename the materials for the collision. So I could export the collision with the Ogre Cave exporter and export the other piece. So while I was talking about it, it actually occurred to me that I hadn't changed the material names inside of the collision file. So I'm actually quite surprised it worked at all. Let's fix it now while we're thinking about it. I'm going to stop my guts editor. Close that. Let's save. Let's save this so that we can use it as a test again next time. I'll just put it here for now. Okay. So we want to edit this XML like we had done before. Changing this underscore that's in the middle to a slash. Then we'll come down to the bottom, remove the submeshes, save it. That ought to be good. Now I need my Ogre tools to copy this over. Got my Ogre command line tools back up. Take the collision mesh, run it through my converter shortcut. It's created a new mesh for me. Let's double check. Take a look at the materials. It does have the slash in it. And also verify that up here. Now we want to copy that back into our mod. Overwrite that. And where'd guts go? There it is. Restart guts. Guts is reloaded. We can come in and open that layout that we had just created. There it is. Let's run it. See if the behavior is any different. Looks about the same, but at least now we know that we have the appropriate materials on that. So I still think that the Ogre Cave exporter is better for the collision meshes using the shared vertices than what it would be for using the combined collision maps from the other exporter. And there's no reason you couldn't use the pink vertex exporter for your textured meshes, like your level pieces here, and then turn around and use the Ogre Cave exporter for your collision meshes. So I came back to the pink vertex version of our mod with our floor piece, and I reordered these collision files. And what I think is happening is that the order matters here. So if I had two collision, or I've got two collision files, but if I had two mesh files, that whatever mesh file is in position 1 here would match up with whichever collision file is in position 1. So if I added a second mesh file, like we saw back in the original catacomb here, that I could have, each one could have its own collision file and it would match them appropriately. However, in this case, we only have the one. And so what it's doing is it's only using whatever the first one is on the list. I reordered these, and when I do that, I can come back and I can just run straight through that little obstacle that we set up. So it's only using the first collision file. It's not adding them together. So in order to get proper collision files where you have part of it can be walked on and part of it can't, you're going to need to go and use that Ogre Cave, the Ogre Cave version of the plugin, in order to get the multi-material export. If the meshes you're exporting only require a collision you can walk on or a collision that you can't walk on and not both, then it would be fine to use the standard, weapon export. But for ones that are a little more complex like this, where you have both, it's probably better to use the Ogre Cave exporter. Not that you couldn't merge them by hand editing the XML, but I think it's simpler just to export it with the Ogre Cave plugin and then modify those materials. So the last thing I wanted to show you was how to create our little preview icon in the same format as what the other Torchlight 2 icons are, in case you wanted to put that into your media folder so that you can see it in the editor. If your image isn't showing or isn't editable, then you probably didn't save it as a 16-bit PNG, and you'll need to go re-render that piece and save it out as a 16-bit PNG. I'm going to open it with Paint.net. It's my go-to for quick editing. It's powerful enough for many things. If I need more, I use GIMP. You can use whatever you feel like, as long as it does the job. The size of the icons in Torchlight for these little previews is 64 by 64. However, our resolution needs to be 96 pixels per inch. There is the appropriate size. We'll just save this out. As our thumbnail. And now if we want, we can drag that to the appropriate location in the Torchlight 2 media folder. Granted, it's overwriting stuff, or it's not overwriting, but it's adding more junk to your base Torchlight folder, so I don't really like that, but that's the only way to get these little preview images to show up. This concludes part 6 in my series on modding Torchlight 2 with Blender. These first 6 videos are meant to be watched in order and should have helped you understand the different plugins available and to get started using them. The next set of videos I work on will cover working with animated level set pieces. Thanks for watching, and good luck modding.